My father's voice trembled on the phone when he said, "We need help," and I sent the money without thinking. Then I drove up a month later and found new locks on my childhood front door. The key I'd carried for 40 years didn't fit. I stood on the porch with my overnight bag digging into my shoulder, staring at the brass deadbolt like it had personally decided to shame me. The wood around the knob was freshly sanded, the kind of pale, clean edge that tells you someone cared enough to replace what was worn out. The old paint smell, white, crisp, new, hung in the air, mixed with the sharp bite of fall leaves and the faint smoke from a neighbor's chimney. I tried the key twice, then a third time, as if stubbornness could make metal remember. Behind the glass storm door, I could see my mother's curtains. New ones, too. Not her usual floral, but a modern gray that didn't belong in that house. A house that used to smell like buttered toast and lemon cleaner, like my father's pipe smoke and my mother's hand lotion. A house that held every version of me. And yet there I was, locked out like a stranger. The door opened from the inside, not by my parents, but by my brother. He stood there in a sweatshirt I didn't recognize, holding a mug like he'd been living there long enough to have a favorite cup. His hair was damp like he'd just showered. Behind him, I saw the hallway, brighter than I remembered. Fresh paint. A new runner rug. My stomach dropped. "Diane," he said, blinking like I'd interrupted his morning. "What are you doing here?" My name sounded wrong in his mouth, too casual for what he was doing to me. "I'm here to see Mom and Dad," I said, keeping my voice even. My hands were cold around my keys. They told me they needed help. He leaned against the doorframe as if it belonged to him. As if I was the visitor. "They're resting." "I'll wait," I said. He didn't move. He didn't invite me in. Instead he smiled, just slightly, and said, "Oh, yeah, about that. This house is mine now." For a moment, I thought I misheard him. Like my brain refused to accept words that didn't match reality. "What did you say?" I asked quietly. He shrugged. "Mom and Dad gave it to me. They needed someone here. You know, to take care of things." I felt the porch tilt under my feet, not physically, but emotionally. Like the foundation of my life had shifted by an inch, and I was still trying to balance. I'm Diane Hartwell. I'm 66 now, and as I tell you this, I can still feel the cold metal of that key biting into my palm. Back then, I'd only been retired from nursing for a year. I told myself I was finally going to rest. Finally going to live slower. Instead, I learned that some families don't let you rest. They just find new ways to use you. If you're watching from somewhere far away tonight, tell me where you're watching from. And have you ever been the one everyone calls when they need help? The reliable one, the quiet one, the one who never says no? If you've lived that, even once, go ahead and like and subscribe. These stories aren't just stories. They're what happens when love gets confused with obligation. I grew up in that house in a small town outside Asheville, North Carolina. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a narrow kitchen where my mother's hips always bumped the counter when she turned too fast. The porch swing creaked in the summers. The maple tree out front dropped leaves like gold in October. My father worked at a local plant. My mother did hair out of the back room for extra money. We weren't wealthy, but we had routines, and routines can feel like wealth when you're a child. My brother, Mark, was the sun in that house. Everything orbited around him. His baseball games, his moods, his needs. My mother used to cut the crusts off his sandwiches until he was 15, and nobody dared comment on it. I was the one who did the dishes. The one who folded laundry. The one who learned early that being good meant being helpful. When I became a nurse, My parents told everyone like it was their achievement. My mother cried when I got my PIN. My father hugged me awkwardly and said, "You'll always have work. People always get sick." And he was right. That job took me into other people's homes and hospital rooms. It taught me how families behave when they're scared. It taught me how they fight over oxygen tanks and wills, how they promise things in the hallway and forget them by morning. So when my parents called me 2 years after I retired and said they were struggling, I believed them. My mother sounded small on the phone. "We're behind," she whispered. "Just a little. We hate to ask." My father cleared his throat in the background. "We just need help," he said. "Until things straighten out." I didn't ask what things meant. I didn't demand receipts. I didn't ask why Mark couldn't help. I just said, "How much?" And then, month after month, I sent it. Quietly. Automatically. Like a bill. Because that's what I'd always been. Reliable.
Standing on that porch now, hearing my brother call my childhood home his, I realized something sharp and humiliating. They hadn't needed help. They'd needed me to keep funding the lie. Mark stepped aside a fraction, finally letting the door open wider. "Come in if you want," he said, like he was being generous. I walked past him slowly, my eyes scanning the walls. Photos had been moved. New frames. My father's old recliner was gone, replaced by a sleek chair that looked uncomfortable. The house smelled different, like citrus cleaning spray and something fried. My mother's voice drifted from the living room. "Is that Diane?" My throat tightened. "Yes," I called. She appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked older than the last time I'd seen her. Her hair was thinner. Her eyes darted behind me toward Mark before settling on my face. She smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was careful. "Oh honey," she said, stepping forward. "You should have called first." Called first. As if I didn't belong. As if I hadn't helped pay for whatever new curtains now hung in my mother's window. My father shuffled in behind her, slower, leaning slightly to one side. He avoided my eyes. "Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He nodded once. "Diane." Mark's voice came from behind me. "She's surprised, that's all." My mother laughed softly. "It's just, things changed." I looked from my mother to my father. Then I asked the question that had been building in me since my key failed. "What do you mean the house is Mark's?" My mother's smile tightened. My father sat down heavily like he'd been waiting for this moment to arrive. And nobody answered right away. My mother folded the dish towel over and over in her hands, smoothing it like it could smooth the moment too. "Well," she said finally, not looking at me, "Mark moved back to town. It just made sense." Made sense to who? I asked. My father cleared his throat. "We're getting older," he said. "It's good to have family close." "I am family," I said quietly. Mark shifted behind me. I could feel his presence like pressure between my shoulder blades. "You live 3 hours away," he said. "You've got your own place. Your own life." I turned to face him. "And I've been sending money every month because you told me you needed help." My mother flinched at that, just slightly. "We did need help," she said quickly. "Groceries, utilities, things add up." "And the new locks?" I asked. "The paint? The furniture?" Silence. My father stared at his hands. My mother's mouth opened, then closed again. Mark sighed, like I was being unreasonable. "They signed the house over to me," he said. "It's legal. They wanted it handled." "Handled," I repeated. The word tasted bitter. "When?" "Last spring," he said. "Last spring." The same spring my mother had called crying about being behind on bills. The same spring I'd cut back on my own expenses because I told myself it was temporary. Because I told myself family doesn't lie. My chest felt tight, but my voice stayed calm. Nursing had taught me that tone matters more than volume. So while I was sending money, I said slowly, "You were taking ownership of the house." Mark shrugged. "You would have sent it anyway." That was the moment something in me cracked, not loudly, not dramatically, but cleanly. "You didn't even ask me," I said, turning back to my parents. "You didn't tell me." My mother finally met my eyes. There was something like shame there, but it was buried under something older. "Habit. You're good at handling things," she said. "Mark, he struggles." I laughed once, a short sound that surprised even me. "He struggles, so you reward him. I manage, so you use me." "That's not fair," my father said, though he didn't sound convinced. "No," I said gently. "It's just accurate." I walked down the hallway, past the bathroom where I'd once hidden to cry after a fight with my first boyfriend, past the bedroom that had been mine until I left for nursing school. The door was open now. My room was gone. The walls were a neutral beige. The bed was bigger. A man's shoes lined the closet floor. My dresser, the one my father built when I was 16, was missing. "Where's my dresser?" I asked from the doorway. Mark appeared beside me. "I sold it," he said. "Didn't fit the space." I nodded slowly. Something settled in me then, heavy and final. I turned back to my parents. "I need to understand something," I said. "Did you ever plan to tell me the house was being given to Mark?" My mother hesitated. My father looked away. "That's what I thought," I said. I picked up my overnight bag. It felt lighter than it should have. "I'm going to leave," I said. "But before I do, I want to be very clear." They all looked at me then. "I'm done sending money," I said calmly. "Effective immediately." My mother's face crumpled. "Diane." "No," I said softly. "You made a choice. So am I." Mark scoffed. "You can't just cut them off." "I can," I said. "And I am." My father stood up, unsteady. "We didn't mean to hurt you." "I believe you," I said. "But intention doesn't erase impact." At the door, my mother reached for me. "You're still our daughter." I paused, my hand on the knob. "I know," I said. "But I won't be your solution anymore." Outside, the air felt sharper, cleaner. I sat in my car for a long moment before starting the engine. My hands were steady on the wheel. As I drove away, the house grew smaller in the rearview mirror. The maple tree. The porch swing. The place where I'd learned to be useful before I learned to be valued. That night, back in my quiet apartment, I stared at the wall and replayed the conversation over and over. Not because I doubted myself, but because I was finally seeing my life clearly. I'd been the reliable daughter for decades. The one who showed up. The one who sent money. The one who didn't ask for much. And still, I'd been replaceable. Before I tell you what I found when I started looking at bank statements, and the one thing I decided to take back from that house, I want to ask you something. Have you ever realized that the people who depend on you the most are sometimes the ones who respect you the least? I didn't go back to sleep that night. I lay on my couch with a blanket pulled up to my chin, listening to the refrigerator hum and the occasional car pass outside. My apartment felt smaller than usual, but also safer. Nothing in it was borrowed. Nothing in it could be taken without my knowing. By morning, the sadness had shifted into something else. Not rage. Not revenge. Curiosity. I opened my laptop and pulled up my bank statements. Nursing had trained me to notice patterns, changes in vitals, numbers that drift slowly before they crash. Money works the same way. I scrolled back month by month, lining up dates with memory. The first wire transfer, then the second, then the steady rhythm of it, like a pulse. Utilities, my mother had said. Groceries. Just until things straighten out. But the amounts didn't match that story. I opened a spreadsheet and started noting the transfers. I compared them to average utility costs in their county. I pulled up property records for the house. That's when I saw it. The deed transfer date. Last spring. The same month my father's voice had sounded weak on the phone. The same week my mother cried about being behind on bills. The same week Mark moved back to town. My stomach tightened, but my hand stayed steady. They hadn't needed help to keep the lights on. They'd needed help making the transition smoother. My money hadn't gone toward survival. It had gone toward comfort. Toward Mark settling in. Toward renovations that erased me room by room. I closed the laptop and sat back, letting the truth settle without rushing it away. There's a moment, if you let yourself have it, when betrayal stops being shocking and starts being explanatory. Suddenly, everything makes sense. The careful smiles. The vague answers. The way my mother always ended calls quickly once the transfer cleared. That afternoon, I drove back toward Asheville. Not to confront anyone. Not to argue. I'd already said what needed saying. I went back for one thing. When I pulled into the driveway, Mark's truck was there. I waited until he left. I didn't want witnesses. I didn't want commentary. I wanted quiet. My mother answered the door, surprised but relieved. "Diane," she said. I didn't think. "I just need to pick something up," I said. My voice was calm. "It won't take long." She nodded and stepped aside. I walked through the house slowly, letting myself see it clearly this time. The new rug. The rearranged photos. The way my childhood had been edited down to a few acceptable memories in frames Mark hadn't removed yet. I went straight to the hallway closet. At the back, behind winter coats and a box of old shoes, was what I was looking for. My father's toolbox. It was red, scratched, dented at one corner. The latch stuck unless you pressed it just right. He used to let me hold the flashlight while he fixed things. Loose cabinet hinges, a broken porch board, the old dresser he built for me when I turned 16. I lifted the box. It was heavier than I remembered. Solid. Honest. My mother watched me from the doorway. "Your father used that all the time," she said softly. "I know," I replied. "You don't need it," she added, quickly. Too quickly. "I need this," I said gently. She didn't argue. That surprised me. As I turned to leave, she reached out and touched my arm. Her hand was warm, familiar. "We didn't think you'd mind," she said. "You're so capable." I met her eyes. "That's exactly why you should have." Something flickered across her face then, regret, maybe. Or recognition. I didn't wait to find out. Back in my car, I set the toolbox on the passenger seat like a companion. As I pulled away, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. That evening, my phone rang. It was Mark. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded. "I picked up Dad's toolbox," I said. "That's part of the house now," he snapped. "No," I replied. "It's part of my history." "You're being dramatic," he said. "You always do this when you don't get your way." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "I got my way a long time ago, Mark. I just didn't know it yet." He scoffed. "So you're really cutting them off?" "I already did," I said. "And before you ask, no, I'm not changing my mind." There was a pause. Then his voice dropped. "They're scared." "I was scared too," I said. "For years. You just never noticed." I hung up and set the phone down. That night, I opened the toolbox at my kitchen table. Inside were familiar things: a worn tape measure, mismatched screws, a small hammer with a cracked handle. At the bottom was a folded piece of paper. My name was written on it in my father's handwriting. Inside, just one sentence: "Diane, this is yours. You know what to do." I sat there for a long time, the paper trembling slightly in my fingers. For the first time since that locked door, I cried, not because I'd lost something, but because I finally understood what I'd been given. Before I tell you how this choice changed my relationship with my parents and what kind of home I decided to build for myself, I want to ask you something. Have you ever realized that reclaiming one small thing can sometimes give you back more of yourself than winning any argument ever could? The days that followed were quieter than I expected. No frantic calls. No apologies. No sudden emergencies that only I could solve. The silence felt unnatural at first, like a limb gone numb. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for my mother to call crying, for my father to ask me to reconsider, for Mark to send a message sharp enough to pull me back into the old rhythm. None of it came. Instead, something else happened. My mornings slowed down. I started taking my coffee out onto the small balcony of my apartment, wrapping myself in a sweater even when the air was cool. I watched the city wake up, delivery trucks idling, a woman walking her dog, the neighbor across the way watering plants with more care than I'd ever given myself. I realized how long it had been since my life belonged entirely to me. A week after I took the toolbox, my mother called. Her voice was thinner. "Careful. Your father's been asking about you." I closed my eyes. "How is he?" "He's quiet," she said. "He keeps saying he didn't mean for things to go this way." "I know," I replied. And I did. My father had always let things happen around him, believing that not choosing was a kind of kindness. "He misses you," she added. "I miss him too," I said softly. "But I can't pretend nothing happened." She sighed. "Mark says you're being stubborn." I smiled faintly. "Mark says a lot of things." There was a pause on the line. "He's struggling," my mother said, almost reflexively. "I struggled too," I replied. "I just did it quietly." That landed between us like a truth she hadn't wanted to hear. We talked a little longer, about the weather, about her doctor appointment, about nothing that mattered enough to hurt. When we hung up, I felt something unexpected. Peace. Not forgiveness. Not resolution. Just peace. I spent the next month doing something radical for me. I stopped explaining myself. When a cousin called and hinted that I should be the bigger person, I said, I already was, and changed the subject. When an old family friend asked if I was worried about my parents, I said, they have each other, and let the silence stretch. At first, it felt rude. Then it felt honest. One afternoon, I drove out to a small plot of land on the edge of town that I'd been eyeing for months. Nothing fancy, just a modest place with a few trees and enough space to breathe. I'd thought about it casually before, the way you think about dreams you assume you won't actually touch. This time, I brought a notebook. I walked the property slowly, listening to the crunch of gravel under my shoes, the wind moving through leaves. I imagined a small house. One bedroom. A kitchen filled with light. A porch where I could sit without remembering who used to own what. A home that didn't come with strings. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight for a place that no longer wanted me. I was going to build one that did. The paperwork took time. Permits. Plans. Meetings with people who asked what kind of house I wanted. Not what I was willing to sacrifice. Each signature felt like a small declaration. This is mine. My parents didn't come to see the land. Mark didn't ask. And for once, that didn't feel like rejection. It felt like release. The first time I used my father's toolbox on the new site, tightening a loose board on the temporary fence, I felt him with me in a way I hadn't in years. Not as an obligation. Not as guilt. As reassurance. "You know what to do," the note had said. I did. By the time the foundation was poured, my mother called again. "Your father wants to see you," she said. "Just you." I took a breath. Okay. I drove up the following weekend. The house looked the same from the outside. Same maple tree. Same porch swing. But I knew better now. My father was sitting in the living room when I arrived, thinner, quieter, but still himself. He looked up when I entered, his eyes softening. "Diane," he said. I sat across from him, close enough to see the tremor in his hands. "I'm sorry," he said after a moment. "I thought giving the house to Mark would make things easier." "For who?" I asked gently. He didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, "Not for you." "No," I said. "It didn't." He nodded, tears gathering. "You were always the steady one." "I didn't want to be," I said. "I wanted to be seen." He reached for my hand, his grip weak but sincere. "I see you now." It wasn't everything, but it was something. And sometimes, something honest is enough to let you move forward. Before I tell you how I finished building that home and what finally changed between me and my mother, I want to ask you this. Have you ever noticed that the moment you stop begging for fairness, you start creating peace instead? The house took longer to build than I expected. Not because of delays or mistakes, but because I was learning how to make decisions without checking them against anyone else's comfort. Every choice, where the windows would face, how wide the porch should be, whether I wanted a bathtub or just a shower, felt heavier than it should have. Freedom does that at first. It makes you aware of how long you've been asking permission without realizing it. I chose wide windows that faced the trees. I chose a kitchen big enough for one person to move slowly without apologizing. I chose a porch that caught the late afternoon light, the kind that makes everything feel forgiving. While the house rose piece by piece, my relationship with my parents shifted into something quieter and more honest. My father didn't ask for money again. Not once. He started calling just to talk, about the weather, about the birds that still came to the feeder, about how strange the house felt with Mark's things everywhere. "I don't recognize my own living room sometimes," he admitted one afternoon. "I didn't say I warned you. I didn't need to." My mother was slower. She called often at first, her voice hovering between concern and accusation. She asked if I was managing okay, if I'd thought about how hard this was on the family. She didn't ask how hard it had been on me. So I stopped answering every call. Not out of spite. Out of necessity. When I did pick up, I kept my answers simple. Kind, but firm. I didn't explain my choices. I didn't justify my boundaries. I let the discomfort sit where it belonged. And slowly, very slowly, she adjusted. One afternoon, months later, she surprised me. "I didn't realize how much we leaned on you," she said quietly. "Until you weren't there to catch us." I didn't respond right away. I let the silence do its work. "I should have told you about the house," she added. "I should have asked." "Yes," I said. "You should have." She cried then. Not loudly. Just a few soft sounds, like air escaping something long held too tight. "I don't know how to fix this," she whispered. "You don't fix it," I said gently. "You respect it." That was the first real conversation we'd had in years. As for Mark, we didn't speak. I heard about him through others. How the house was more expensive to maintain than he'd expected. How my parents' retirement checks didn't stretch as far as he thought they would. How responsibility looked different when it wasn't theoretical. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt distance. And distance, I learned, can be merciful. The day my house was finished, I brought the toolbox inside before anything else. I set it in the hall closet, right by the door. Not hidden. Not displayed. Just where it belonged, ready. That night, I slept in my new bedroom with the windows cracked open. The house smelled like fresh wood and clean paint. No memories clung to the walls yet. No expectations hummed under the surface. Just quiet. I stood on the porch the next morning with my coffee and watched the sun climb over the trees. I thought about the girl I'd been, the one who learned early that love meant being useful. The woman I'd become, the one who mistook endurance for virtue. And the person I was now. Still kind. Still capable. But no longer available for exploitation disguised as need. I didn't cut my family out of my heart. I just stopped letting them live rent-free in my life. Before I tell you how I look back on all of this now, and what I would say to the younger version of myself who thought love had to hurt to be real, I want to ask you something. Have you ever realized that choosing yourself doesn't mean you love others less? It just means you finally love yourself enough? I'm 72 now as I sit here telling you this. The house has settled the way homes do after a few years. Small creaks at night, floorboards that recognize your step, windows that rattle only when the wind comes from the east. I planted a garden the second spring I lived here. Nothing ambitious. Tomatoes. Rosemary. A row of flowers my father once said were hard to kill, which felt like an endorsement. Some mornings, I still wake up expecting to feel guilty. That's the strange thing no one warns you about. When you stop being the family safety net, your body remembers the weight long after your mind lets it go. I'd lie there listening to birds outside my window, thinking I must have forgotten something. A call I should make. A problem I should fix. But there was nothing. Just quiet. My parents come to visit now. Not often, and not without notice. My father moves slower these days, leaning on his cane as he walks the porch, looking out over the yard like he's trying to memorize it. My mother brings baked goods she insists are too much for just the two of them, and sometimes she cleans my kitchen without asking. Old habits die hard. But something is different. They don't ask for money. They don't talk about help. They don't assume. And when they leave, they thank me, not just for the visit, but for the boundary. Even if they don't say it in so many words, I can feel it in the way they mind my space now. Mark never came. I heard once that he moved out of the house after an argument with my parents. That the responsibilities he'd accepted so easily felt heavier when no one else was carrying them. I don't know if that's true. I didn't ask. Some chapters don't need rereading. What I do know is this: I stopped bleeding money, and I started building life. I volunteered twice a week at a small clinic. I take long walks without tracking time. I sit on my porch in the evenings and watch the light change, feeling no urge to be anywhere else. And sometimes, when I open the hall closet and see my father's toolbox sitting there, I smile. Because I didn't take the house. I took myself back. For most of my life, I believed being needed was the same as being loved. That if I just kept showing up, kept giving, kept fixing things quietly, someone would notice and choose me without being asked. But love doesn't work that way. Real love doesn't require you to disappear. It doesn't punish you for having limits. It doesn't confuse generosity with obligation. I don't regret helping my parents when I believed they needed me. Compassion given in good faith is never something to be ashamed of. What I regret is how long it took me to realize that kindness doesn't mean surrender. If I could sit across from the woman I was at 66, standing on that porch, key in hand, realizing she'd been locked out of her own past, I'd take her face in my hands and tell her this. You are not selfish for stopping. You are not cruel for choosing yourself. And you are not abandoning anyone by refusing to be used. You are simply growing up, even if it happens later than you planned. And maybe that's the real inheritance we earn in the end. Not houses or money or approval, but the quiet confidence that comes from finally standing on ground that is yours. So I'll leave you with this. If you stopped rescuing everyone else, what kind of life might you finally have room to build? Before we part, I want to leave you with this, softly, honestly, the way these truths usually arrive. For most of my life, I believed love meant sacrifice without limits. That being a good daughter meant answering every call, filling every gap, and never asking who would catch me if I fell. I thought if I stayed useful enough, steady enough, quiet enough, I would always have a place. But what I learned, much later than I wish, is that love built on obligation eventually turns into resentment on both sides. Stepping back didn't make me colder. It didn't make me cruel. It made me clear. Clear about what I could give. Clear about what I would no longer carry. Clear about who I was when no one was asking anything of me. If this story felt familiar, maybe you're the reliable one too. The one who sends the money, shows up, fixes things, and tells yourself, it's fine, I can handle it. If that's you, I hope you pause tonight and ask yourself something gently, but honestly. Who takes care of you when you stop being useful? If you could speak to your younger self, the one who learned too early that love meant earning, what would you tell them now? And if these stories give you a place to breathe, to feel seen, to remember yourself, I hope you'll stay. You're not alone here.